Detective Comics 575 will start things off. This is, of course, start of year 2, as I said. This is kind of interesting for me because I've heard a couple of things that people don't like about this story, but I've never read it. And I don't know a lot of the details. I know that there's some stuff with the gun that killed his parents. So that was the only thing I really knew going into this. So how much were you aware? Assuming you hadn't read it already.
Just that as well. I knew it had a reputation,
Mm-hmm.
but I didn't know what to expect exactly. I did not realize, they say earlier, it was so close to year one in terms of publication. Obviously, that sold well, and the editors were like, "Do more, people."
Yeah, it was like a month between the last issue of year 1 and then this. Like a 1 month like in between, I think.
Yeah, I can only assume the first issue did so well that they immediately shifted gears in the editorial offices and
I
just
guess
went,
there is a nice quality to it in that you've used year 1 to kind of like establish Batman as a different type of book. And admittedly, I think Batman, the first issue we've read that's been after year 1, feels, pretty old school again in comparison to year 1, but year 1's kind of this template going forward. I think Detective, it makes sense to give Detective kind of a similar thing where that gets a story that kind of establishes that, okay, now we're really going into post-crisis Detective Comics. So I don't know if it necessarily had to be year 2, but it works
it does,
on a
it does.
conceptual level. So this is Mike W. Barr and Alan Davis on writing and art, respectively, who were on the book anyway. It's not like this,
Yeah,
Oh,
I had
actually, or were they on Batman before? They've definitely been on some Bat books that we've been talking about in this show.
no, I think they've been on this because I have just the year 2 collection,
Mm-hmm.
and I read the intro letter, and they talked about how
Ah,
they'd been on their run, they had to interrupt their tales of Batman and Robin to do this.
interesting. Notably, the bigger anniversary trade that I'm looking at for these issues also has Batman the Circle, which is a graphic novel, I think, which came out like in 1991. So we're not going to do that just now. It's maybe something when we get to that point in 1991, 1992, whenever it came out. That's maybe when we'll look at that. But it's worth
Yeah,
mentioning for value's sake. It's in there too. So
it is. It's a Batman full circle.
there you go. So yeah, so Batman 575, or sorry, Detective Comics 575, to be correct. It kicks off with Gordon on a news. Now, the Gordon is not as, he's definitely not the main character of this book like he was year 1, but clearly they're trying to include him at least in a healthy capacity.
It's just enough here to link it in your mind to
Mm-hmm.
year 1, I think.
Yeah, and it's basically Gordon's on this talk show talking about what the current relationship between the police department and the Batman is, debating the Batman, and it introduces this idea of the Reaper, this vigilante who went around killing bad guys a few decades ago.
Yeah, it was
And
like 20 years ago.
we get this like image on the screen. So it's actually I like the little touch. It says artist rendition because no one's actually ever gotten a photo of him. So it's like artist rendition. He is dressed kind of like a Reaper, like a Grim Reaper almost.
Yeah, big scythe.
Yeah, although the scythe is more like a one that's coming out of his sleeve. It's not like a big stick with a scythe.
It's like a scythe hand.
Yeah. So it just kind of sets these things up, and it brings up the idea that they've got the bat signal now. And she keeps getting it wrong. She keeps calling him Captain Gordon, and he's just been promoted to Commissioner. So it's doing some, continuity stuff here, which is nice. Just establishing the timeline, like where this is and how the early days of Batman formed. I also really like the transition because there's some criminals sort of hearing this in the TV as they're robbing a place, and we see the bat signal in the sky when they mention it. And I like that the next panel is one of their flashlights hitting Batman's chest, and it looks kind of like the bat signal again.
Yeah,
I like that transition.
really good.
Really
I
nice
actually
little
think
touch.
the art in this is fantastic. This issue.
It's pretty good. Honestly, the only thing going against it is that it's meant to be a follow up in some way to year 1, and it looks nothing like year 1.
Yeah, no, I think if you disregard the comparison to year 1,
Yeah,
I think this is the best outside of year 1. I think this is the best either of this, this or Batman has looked since we've
yeah.
started.
No, I could see that. I could see that. I like that moment especially. I think all the stuff with the signal's really good because you see it a lot because they end up turning out the lights and it
This
actually
whole fight sequence. I mean, fight sequence has been a bit generous, maybe, but
yeah, it's Batman in the dark. We see all the sound effects and it's good. But I think what this does really smartly though, given what the cliffhanger of this issue is, and given that we've already mentioned, we knew it was going to be about Batman and the gun that killed his parents. I think it's really neat that this fight scene does establish thematically that we're going to be talking about guns in this because You know, because he says, like, oh, because they say, oh, we've got guns at least, and he's like, well, if you're putting your faith in guns, you've already lost. So
Yeah.
it sets up thematically quite early on what this book's going to be tackling.
And also the last panel of that page after Batman jumps out the window, it's him swinging in towards the bat signal. That's a panel I've seen used without the dialogue
Oh,
a
sure.
lot.
Yeah.
It's I think it sticks out in my mind with the way the cape is, the way the rope below him is hooked. I can definitely remember seeing this particular image used quite a bit.
Yeah, and then we're introduced to some new characters. I laughed at someone who's kind of a love interest for Bruce is called Rachel in this because my mind immediately started going, Rachel, Rachel.
Doesn't everyone's?
It's bad enough in stuff that's not Batman, but I'll start doing it because someone's called Rachel. But in a Batman thing, especially, come on.
You can't help yourself.
Yes, it's not that Rachel, of course, but I'm pretty sure that Rachel was invented for the movie. But
Pretty sure, yeah.
But yeah, so Leslie knows this young woman who's welcoming her father, who's returning to town. This old man. I was getting Joe. I was almost thinking of here. He's a bit taller than this guy, but I was thinking of Hector Salamanca from Saul and Breaking Bad a little bit.
I can see that.
Especially at the bottom of the page where it intentionally looks a bit more menacing with a low angle.
Yeah, I can see it.
Yeah, maybe a cross between
Hector Salamanca with the fireman from Twin Peaks.
Oh, I was going to say mixed with the tall man from Phantasm, but
Okay, yeah.
I could see your comparison to.
The face shape kind of went is kind of why I went mine, but
yeah. So so Leslie's actually knows this woman. She's taking her for a dinner, which turns out to be with Bruce Wayne because they're basically trying to talk Bruce into giving money to her noble cause.
usual.
But but it's established this old guy, right? Bruce is making people work overtime to build this building, and he's going to give the penthouse to Leslie, and she's like, "Well, that's too much, Bruce." But Bruce takes quite a liking to this young Rachel. He's all excited that she's got this noble because he's not really that interested at first. He's just kind of like fobbing her off, but when she starts talking about like understanding why evil exists in the world so she can fight it, it's like, oh, he gets a bit of a backboner, you might say.
Yeah, and then she she blue balls him a bit and goes, "Sorry, I'm off to be a nun. Didn't I mention that?"
Yeah, because he asked her out to like the ballet, which again makes me think of Dark Knight, actually.
Yeah, I can see it.
But she's like, "Oh, sorry, I can't go." He's like, "Wait, is there someone else?" That's understandable. He's ready to accept that, and she's like, "No, I'm becoming a nun." It's like, "Oh, okay, fair enough, I guess."
Yeah.
Well. But no, obviously, Mr. Caspian, his name, isn't home when she gets there, and he's walking down some shady neighborhoods in Gotham, and he witnesses a mugging happening. This young woman's being mugged by a bunch of thugs, and we see him open his closet to reveal his sickle hands and whatnot, and it's like, oh shit. I mean, it's not surprising. I mean, I'm saying oh shit because I'm giving the book what it wants from me. It's not that surprising that the one character that introduced who's a bit older turns out to be the character that introduced in the first page.
Honestly, the only surprise I had at any of this point is that she wasn't the Reaper, in the sense that she's inherited the mantle almost.
Hey, if they'd done that, this would be so close to Mask of Phantasm in a lot of ways.
Really?
Long before Phantasm existed. And it's funny that I brought up the tall man earlier, which is a Phantasm thing. But yeah, even Mask of Phantasm, when I think about the Phantasm character, the costume was not a million miles away from this Reaper costume. Maybe there's some influence there.
I mean, it's perfectly plausible.
Yeah, doesn't have sickles or anything like that, but
I actually really like the design of the Reaper. And when we see him a little bit later in the with the actual red armor, I know this isn't quite there yet, but it feels very 90s. Like I can see how we're getting towards the 90s
Oh, sure,
in that
yeah.
sort of design aesthetic.
Yeah, what's actually really funny is that between this episode and last episode, I actually, just to make sure we were reading Detective and Batman in the right order, because obviously we've just been alternating, which for the most part should be right, but obviously eventually one may get delayed or when other Bat books are introduced and that kind of thing. And I mapped out like to the end of 87, no, 88, we're on 87 I think, to the end of 1988, and there is a couple of times it changes, but it was just kind of fascinating looking at like, because we were saying just a week or two ago like how close Death in the Family is, and in terms of like how many episodes we have to go through to get to it, it's still quite far away. It's late.
Yeah, we're on episode what
15.
15,
Yeah, this is
and
15.
I think you said to me it's going to be around 60ish.
Depending, I can see us doubling up in the Bat books before then, though, so we might get there quicker.
Yeah, but if we kept the current pace,
yeah, I think we'll probably double up just so we're doing a month of Batman books per episode as opposed to half a month of Batman books. Mainly because by the time we get to the end of the following year, we're starting to sneak in like miniseries that were happening and things like that. So
yeah,
just keep
and
us going at a pace.
a little bit of a behind the scenes glimpse. Thanks to our new recording schedule that we have for this, it shouldn't be too difficult to actually kind of squeeze that in.
Honestly, it's better for us to have an even number of books now, which is why I'm thinking we'll probably double up a bit earlier than we were going to.
Sounds reasonable.
But yeah, so I'll be honest, this is the weird thing, is that I came into this with expectations, and I actually kind of liked the issue a lot.
No, I did too. Maybe it goes off the rails. There's the moment at the end.
The cliffhanger is the only thing that would have made me go, oh, I want to see what they're going to do with this. And I have no idea what he does with the gun, so it might really upset me. It's like the way I love the type of Batman I love, the values I subscribe to Batman is having. Maybe this story is going to really piss me off later, but this issue on its own, I actually really liked.
I do as well. And just in defense of the gun, well, not using it entirely, but the story here is early days. That's the point.
Yeah.
If the story of this is reaffirming, no, I can't ever use a gun.
Yeah. If this is the story that sort of makes him say, no matter what, that is just burned into me now. That's who I am.
I'm okay with him shooting a gun in this early story, right? As long as that's the message by the end. Obviously, he can't kill anyone with it. That would obviously be way too far. But if he shoots the gun, and then by the end of the story, it comes through, and he's like, "No, I can never touch a gun again." I'm okay with that as long as it's handled reasonably well.
Yeah. I mean, maybe even if he does hit someone with it and they end up in life support, and he actually feels so relieved when they don't die or something. I could see that being kind of the beat.
Sure.
I mean, that's the thing. People who have read this will know this, and don't tell us. But we'll discover it through the issues. It's part of the fun of doing this show. But before we get to the end, though, there's a scene where he's with Leslie, and it reestablishes Leslie does know who he is, because Alfred doesn't hide the fact that, hey, the bat signals are on, sir. Have to.
Yeah, and he goes off the clock, and she's just like, really? You have to do this? Because
I actually really like the moment, because he goes off down to the cave, and Leslie says something like, after Bruce is like, I promise I'll come back, yada yada. She says to Alfred, hey, what's it actually like? Because she's never been down the back. So what's it like down there, Alfred? And he says, I think, Miss Leslie, it may be the only place on earth where he truly feels himself. And I love that you go from this brightly lit, living room up in the mansion down to the dark, gloomy cave, and there's that panel of Bruce holding the bat costume, and it's the sort of dark blues, and his face is got a lot of shadow on it, and it really feels like, the Bruce Wayne that we mostly see is the act, right? And then this is where he's truly himself. I love that for as much places this story might go that might upset us later, I think this issue does a really good job of really establishing some of those early bat things that we like.
In many ways, this feels closest to, again, discounting year one from this conversation in terms of the Batman detective books we've been reading from this time. This feels the closest to what we recognize as modern Batman, I would say, out of everything. So
you can feel it getting there. The Batline as a whole is getting there. We're seeing signs of it creep in here, which is great. So Batman goes to speak to Gordon, who informs him of the Reaper, who did kill like a whole gang like the night before. As the scene we kind of glossed over the actual killing part.
Which is a gorgeous couple of pages, actually. The way the Reaper is presented with the shadow and just the sights coming out and just the slashes and the blood. And you see like a guy's hand coming off just in the shadow. I thought that was a fantastic touch. I
quite like the colouring on these Gordon pages. Mainly the idea that Batman's got his blue cape here. So what they do with the city is that the idea of the orange glow of the city lights. So the building and all the light coming through the windows are orange. So anyway, it's the sort of thing that movie posters were using for ages, was the blue and orange contrast, but it actually works really well.
There's a reason why movie posters were doing it, because it works.
There's only so many colours on the spectrum. When you find the combinations that work, you got to go with it.
Nothing wrong with that.
But of course, Reaper's out, attacking another. Batman figures out that, well, the place he sort of was patrolled before was a place that used to be nicer 20 years ago, but is now, kind of, full of crime and whatnot. So he predicts where Reaper's going to go. Reaper goes to attack, and Batman goes to fight him. But Reaper, revealing, pulling back his cloak, reveals that he's got thick leather red armor on underneath.
And this is where it feels kind of proto 90s. It's not quite bulky enough, but you got the big shoulder pads, you got the spikes and the stuff coming off it. Like, yeah, it's starting to get towards that period.
Yeah, so they have a big fight for a few pages. Batman gets slashed a number of times, and it's just proper. And then he gets shot. It ends with Reaper just firing bullets into him, and he does hit him a few times. Batman obviously escapes out of the sewer to escape certain death, but he crawls home. Alfred finds him bloody on the floor. Leslie's there when he wakes up, and he's like, "See, I made it back." Little worse for wear, but I made it back.
Yeah.
But yeah, he pulls out. I mean, and there's a little snippet flashback of Bruce pocketing the gun, as a kid, in the crime scene. Which, I mean, I guess the police would have just assumed the bad guy would have taken the gun with him, so that's why they never.
I guess they did, yeah.
Yeah, but I'm like, the police never like.
Like, the police were corrupt as shit. They didn't care.
True. But yeah, the cliffhanger is him pulling out the gun from under the portrait of his parents, saying, I have to fight them on their own terms.
Yeah, I like in concept. Again, I'm not annoyed by this because this is him. He said no. He used everything he had, all his skill, all his strength, and it wasn't enough. Maybe guns are the only way that I can do this.
Yeah,
and him having that contemplation is a story worth telling, I think.
Him failing first, I think, is really important. If he just sort of leapt to this for almost no reason, I'd have a big problem with it. Obviously, the point of this story by the end has to be that he's going to never do it again and swear off of it. But as of yet, I'm not pissed off.
No, I think that is a story. Like I said, it's a story worth telling, and obviously they did tell it.
This story has a reputation for not, for people hating it. So I'm kind of like semi-predicting that something's going to piss me off at some point. I just don't know what it is yet.
Yeah, but on the other end of the spectrum, Emperor Joker had a reputation for being good. So
that's yes, and that was almost complete garbage, barring like one issue, 1.5 issues maybe, to be generous.
Yeah, so maybe we'll book the trend here too.
Yeah, maybe. So that is Detective Comics 575. What are you giving it?
I'm gonna give it an 8. Actually, I was thinking between the 7.5 and the 8, and I'm just about gonna give it to it.
Yeah, I like it. It's obviously not as good as year one, but I think as a continuity follow up to sort of obviously in my head I've always kind of considered Long Halloween to be kind of year 2 esque, or maybe year 3 to fit it after this if we really want to sort of slot everything together. But this is honestly, I thought this was a fine issue. Good art, some good bat beats. Yeah,
I'm kind of into it.
I've used Bat Boner and Bat Beats both in the duration of this review. I'm proud of myself. So if I can make more bat puns as we go, and they're not really puns. They're just more, goofy Batman stuff that you can thank the '60s show for more than anything else. There's a bat everything basically. So yeah, I'll give it the 8 as well, as we saw was in there.